Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha. I'm a reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Shout out to the chat. Hope you all are doing well. Just got back from day 3 of Lakers training camp. We don't have much to talk about. There's a little bit with the injury stuff, some stuff with the conditioning, and how JJ is going to be approaching game 1 of the preseason. But wanted to hop on here and talk about memberships, which just launched on the channel. It's officially live. We have 3 tiers of membership. Tier 1 is Late Night Gang. Tier 2 is Baloncesto Sickos, which is a shout out to my Puerto Rican side. Also a shout out to JJ and the basketball sickos reference that actually preceded him being the Lakers coach, but has continued as he's been the Lakers coach. And then tier 3, Buha's Brates. We already have a bunch of people signing up. So of course, no pressure, no expectation, but I know people have been asking about memberships for months. So wanted to, once I had a little bit clearer idea about my future, make sure I launched that right before the season started. So, love to just continue to build that out. And as we get more memberships, they only allowed me to upload 4 emojis, and I just went and created 20 emojis. So as more people sign up, I will be adding a bunch of emojis and a bunch of fun references to the Late Night Gang and 5 more minutes and just different inside jokes with the chat and the community here. But let's get into 3 takeaways from day 3 of Lakers training camp, and then we will get into the Q&A portion. Shout out to everybody in the chat quickly. Seeing Magic of the Dawn, BC, Kevin Cambridge, Cozy Newton, Brendan, Sarah, Sebastian. Seeing Sarah already signed up, as did Sebastian, so shout out to you guys. Cozy Newton saying I gotta add a Laravia lookalike. We'll see. We'll see. So 3 takeaways from today's final day of practice before the Lakers head over to Palm Springs, Palm Desert for their season or preseason opener against Phoenix on Friday. Takeaway number 1 is going to be the injury updates. So Maxi Kleber is suffered a minor quad injury. He's going to be out for a few days. Sounds like he's going to miss at least Friday and Sunday, first couple of preseason games. And JJ said it's more of a precaution than anything, but that's not expected to be a long-term injury with Maxi. But that officially rules out LeBron James, Marcus Smart, Maxi Kleber, and Adu Thero for Friday's opener against Phoenix. JJ said they're still determining if anyone else is going to miss some time, and did note that he wants to be particularly careful with the workloads of Austin, who they track how hard, how much each player is running, how much energy expenditure. They have those biometric markers on each player that they're tracking. And JJ said that Austin was the player with the highest workload on all 3 days of training camp. So he wants to be careful with Austin and not tire him out to start the season. And then he also wants to be careful with Luka coming off of Eurobasket, not really having much of a break this offseason. So those 2 guys he wants to be careful with the minutes of. But in general, he said he wants to play the guys short bursts in the preseason opener. So entering Friday's game, the Lakers will only have at most 10 of the 14 roster players available, and that number could potentially be a little bit lower, or at least some of the guys on a bit of a minutes restriction or just some minutes caution. JJ also indicated that they're going to be going with a semi-normal rotation for 3 to 3.5 quarters, but again, no LeBron, no Marcus, and we'll see if Maxi ends up being in the rotation, but just no LeBron and no Marcus alone means we're not really seeing what the rotation looks like. Takeaway number 2 is conditioning continues to be the emphasis here through the first 3 days. So JJ said that the Lakers are in better shape and better conditioned than they were 3 days ago. They're communicating better than they were 3 days ago. He said he doesn't think the guys are very happy with him right now. And part of that is because they closed practice after having a pretty long practice. And they told us to show up at 12 and didn't open up for almost 40 minutes. So they went pretty long. They closed things with a conditioning drill where they had to go the length of the floor there and back 6 times in 34 seconds. They took a short break, then had to go 10 times in a minute, took another short break, and then 6 times again in 34 seconds. So it's called 6-10-6. And that anyone who has played basketball, even at just like the high school level, about sprinting full court and those different conditioning drills, especially after a long practice, that is not fun. And so JJ said that the guys were not thrilled with him at that point, but I think it's setting a certain tone from championship shape, championship habits, championship communication. Like that's been the theme of the preseason, the theme of training camp. The Lakers had they have a TV that they can show film and show different PowerPoint stuff that they want to get across to the players, different slides and stuff. And when we walked in the gym while they're finishing up practice, it had a gold background with purple letters of championship habits, championship shape, championship communication. So that's been the theme. But really the conditioning has been something that every player has talked about. And JJ said what he's looking for with the communication is going to be, are they sprinting back defensively? Are they playing with pace offensively? Are they able to crash the offensive glass and also get back defensively? So that's kind of combining the first two. And then are they being physical with the opponent? And that is what will constitute a success in terms of the championship shape, the physicality and whatnot. So I think I do think like there are some big questions, obviously, with who's going to be available and what is the rotation going to look like? What's the starting lineup going to look like? What tweaks are they going to make offensively and defensively? But in general, I think the approach of prioritizing being in better shape and better conditioned and being more physical, like these are things that are controllable. You can control the type of shape you're in as a team, the type of shape you're in as a roster. And it sounds like that's been to a man, everyone we've spoken to today. We spoke with Luka, Gabe, and JJ. Like everyone continues to echo the same thing. So it feels like everyone's on the same page with that. And then takeaway number 3 was one question that I had for JJ and for Luka today, and this is just something I'm wondering how they view this, was what constitutes a success with the preseason, especially being several players down, a couple of key rotation guys, second best player in LeBron. What constitutes success for Friday's game? Like, what are they looking at? What are they trying to evaluate? They each had different answers. So JJ said it's the conditioning stuff, but it's also how much of what they've implemented in camp in terms of the base offense and the base defense. How are they running it? He said he wants to grade things in basically every area, right? So on defense, it's how are the help rotations? How is the low man? How is the boxing out? How is the communication? How is the screening communication and the switching and everything they're trying to do defensively? He's grading each portion of that. Offensively, it's the same thing with how are they playing with pace? How is the screening? Are they making contact? How is the ball movement? How is the pace of the offense? And are they executing whatever sets he's calling? So that I guess was good to hear of just that they're breaking it down into the minutia and evaluating each part of the offense and defense, and that's going to be how they grade themselves and how they determine what needs to be improved upon throughout the preseason. I think that's a smart approach on the coaching staff's part. And then Luka actually started like laughing and was like, I've never been asked that in my career, which that was surprising to me. But he said that the big thing is just going to be getting on the floor with each other, continuing to develop chemistry, continuity, and then no one getting hurt, which of course is the most important thing in the preseason. Is you want to get into the regular season as healthy as possible. But no real Luka was asked about the Backstreet Boys, and that was kind of a fun storyline from today. But nothing really earth-shattering from today's availabilities. We also didn't really see the guys work out. Austin got some work in after, but that was like really the only person who got some working in front of us. They, again, I think let us in pretty late. So everyone was pretty much done, and they're also traveling to Palm Springs. So with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. What questions do you guys have? Magic of the Dawn, Luka's best defensive season loading. I think that there's a chance for that. I don't know, to be completely honest. I don't know when or what season. I think people who have followed Luka closer, maybe Mavericks fans or Luka fans, could tell me what they consider his best season. Is it the finals year? Is it the conference finals year? Is it earlier in his career? I think I expect him to certainly be better than last season and to certainly be better than the Lakers portion of last season. But I think there's a real chance that he can be like, I don't want to put unrealistic expectations on Luka just because it's hard to be that level of a creator, an offensive juggernaut, and also give maximum effort at all times for all 82 games defensively. There is a reason why it is so hard to be a two-way player at a star level in the NBA. And really, it's the guys who are like the physical, just it's the LeBrons, it's the Giannis's, it's the Tatums, the Ants. Like those guys are just built differently than most of the NBA. So I don't want to put like these unrealistic, like he was obviously challenging for an all defensive team at Eurobasket. I don't think he's gonna be challenging for an all defensive team at the NBA level, but I think he can be much better. And already I think Luka is underrated defensively. And I think that the on-ball stuff can be better in him closing out and preventing dribble penetration and preventing teams from targeting him. That stuff can be better. But in terms of his help defense, he's always in that like 1.5 to 2 steals per game. And so I think like already as a help defender, he is much better than people give him credit for. Shout out to Mo Love, who just became a YouTube member. Appreciate you. Brendan asking RE20 or SM7B. So this is a question for the audio and mic nerds here. So I had an SM7B. Well, I mean, I have both. I had an SM7B for the first like almost a year of the show. Then I switched over to the RE20 because I think it suits my voice better. But I'm just retesting out the SM7B just to make sure I still view it that way. And I use it as my road mic right now, like on the road. But that's the acoustics are kind of wonky doing it in like a hotel. So I wanted to just test it out in the home studio and then listen back to the audio, and based on how I sound, go from there in terms of which mic I want to use going forward. Lakers visuals, what up? Kevin Cambridge, how's Vando looking out there? So didn't really get to see Vando today in terms of him working out, but I can say his shot has looked better. He was raved about yesterday from JJ and said it's night and day compared to last season, said he looks like the pre-injury version of Vando. So Vando's been one of the standouts in camp, and I think that's a serious development for the Lakers. Like if he can get back to being who he was in the 2022-23 season, or even who he was in parts of playing for Utah and Minnesota, that is the type of player who I think could challenge. Just like I think for now it's primarily been a Rui versus Smart conversation, but if Vando can get back to being the player he was 2-3 years ago, I think that player can enter that mix. I still think the biggest thing with Vando, it's not just the health, it's not just how he's moving defensively and the athleticism and the physicality. I think it's also going to be the offensive end. And he quietly improved as a corner three-point shooter last year. He was around league average, which is just that's what you need from Vando. You don't need much more. But I think the issue has been the finishing around the basket. He has been on a steady decline over the past 5 years as a finisher. And there were times last season it felt like he started to get in his head a bit and started to he'd get an offensive rebound, and instead of just going back up for the layup, would look to kick it out. He would catch a pass on a cut or on a dive or on a roll, and instead of like you got to keep the defense honest to an extent. So like I get he is an underrated passer, and there are times where if you're collapsing the defense, it makes sense to kick it out. But there were also times where he had opportunities to score and he was just passing it up, and you could tell he was overthinking it and uncomfortable offensively. So I think that's the area of his game. Like we can talk about the shooting, and I think he is a guy who teams are going to ignore. And if he can make them pay, that's a welcome development for the Lakers offense. But I'm going to be specifically looking at how is he finishing around the basket? How is he doing with offensive rebound putbacks? How's he doing with cuts and rolls? And can he kind of get over some of the things that were holding him back last season for whatever reason? If he can do that, then I think it's a different conversation in terms of Vando's placement within the rotation. I still think, based on everything we know about JJ, based on the way he talks about certain players, he always trends more towards shooting. And I think if a couple players are close to him, he's going to tend to favor the player who's a better shooter. And he's just someone who values spacing and 3-point volume and modern play offensively. So I think that will always hold Vando back to some extent, comparing him to like a Rui or a Jake LaRavia or a Marcus Smart. But if he's that impactful defensively and back to himself physically and athletically, again, I think it's going to be hard to keep him off the floor. Also think, though, he's one of these guys, though, who had similar to Smart, and this is, I think, a pro Rui starting point for Rui over Smart, Rui over Vando. Those guys have had some notable injuries in over the last few seasons. So there's also the question of, like, can you keep those guys? Do they need to be having their workloads monitored and maybe even reduced to keep them healthier for the long run? And maybe those guys are both. Maybe Vando is just kind of stuck in that 15 to 20 minutes a night. Maybe Smart is in that 20 to 25. And it's more so just about keeping those guys healthy, like preserving their current status rather than overtaxing them in a starting role or in a larger role and then not having them come playoff time. Let's see here. Shout out to Alvin for becoming a new member. Appreciate you. Lee Baggy, thank you for the super chat. Give it to me straight, Buha. Is the Lakers defense like butter against a hot knife? Who should we look out for to fix the issue if defense is an issue? I like the analogy there. I don't think it's going to be that bad. I will say I was listening to Laker Film Room podcast the other day, and I thought Pete made a really good point about, like, it has felt like I've been saying it feels like it's trending toward Rui starting, and Anthony Irwin had the report yesterday that he is hearing that Rui is likely going to start, and a part of that is just because Marcus is not fully healthy and cleared right now. But I just think I get the Rui starting from a continuity perspective, maybe from appeasing him to some degree. We haven't talked about it yet, but the deadline passed for Rui to get an extension, and that did not happen. So looks like Rui is going to be an unrestricted free agent next summer. So I get all those things. I just think if you look at the quartet of Luka, LeBron, Austin, and DeAndre Ayton, who I think are the four starting locks, if we are crafting, if this is, if this is 2K and we're building a player to fit as the perfect fifth guy next to that guy, or next to those four, excuse me, I think you want a guy who can play off the ball and who can cut, who can space, who can hit threes. And Rui checks basically all of the boxes offensively. Smart, less so, but I think he does check enough. But then defensively, you want a versatile defender who can basically replace any of those guys in their primary matchup and make all of those guys secondary guys if necessary. And I think Rui can do that in the front court, where he could take on either a 3 or a 4 or maybe even some 5s. We've seen him guard up and guard up well. I don't think Rui could do that in the backcourt. And you are putting, if you start Rui, you're setting up a scenario where Austin is your primary backcourt defender, Rui or Luka is a secondary backcourt defender, and I think that's a mistake. And I don't think you have two quality, like, or not even quality, like just competent backcourt defenders. Like Rui should not be guarding guards. Luka can guard some guards, but you still like so many teams have two weapons back there that I don't think you want to tax Luka defensively, putting him on even a secondary guard necessarily. So like that's where I just keep coming back to. Maybe it ends up being Vando, but I think it should be Smart because he's a much better offensive player. But I do have some concern with the way the starting lineup is trending and them having this shift of like their 5 best offensive players all start. Then they have this Banshee group with the bench, and you just have these two completely polar opposite identities with like the starters are really good offensively but bad defensively. The bench is bad offensively but good defensively. And you can try and mix and match that. But like at the end of the day, I think the starting group is going to be the lineup that plays the most. And my fear is just that group's identity is going to be, can we outscore you? And I think they can outscore most teams. I think 20 to 25 teams, they can outscore consistently. My fear is those top 5 to 10 teams, I don't think, or whatever the remaining number is, 5 to 9 teams, I don't think they can outscore those teams consistently. So I think that they need a better two-way balance. Now, who that player is, I think it's like a Herb Jones type, Wiggins to a lesser extent. I think they need that type of higher level two-way player, but we'll see. BT Kingsley, thank you for the super chat. Is Maxey and Dalton too much for Grimes? He's a young two-way 3-and-D wing, opens roster spot and some money for future flexibility to re-sign new players. Not at all. I would do that in a heartbeat. I think the Lakers would have to throw in some type of draft compensation to execute this deal. Like Grimes just turned down a 4-year, $39 million deal. He is easily going to get mid-level money, if not more, next summer. I suspect he'll be closer to, like, he originally was asking for $30 million, which was too high. Then he was asking for 20 to 25. They weren't willing to do that. But I could see him being a $15 to $20 million player. Philly's just a weird situation for him because they have Maxey, they have McCain, they have Edgecombe. They don't really need Grimes. So I think he will be available for a certain price, and that team will ideally be looking to keep him longer term. But I would do Maxey and Dalton for Grimes in a heartbeat. I just wonder what that is. I don't think a second round pick is enough. So is it a swap? Oh, maybe it's a swap in a second. I don't think the Lakers would want to give up a first for him. I would consider, honestly, based on that, because you're really not losing anything, that might be like your 11th and 12th men in the rotation. If we look at the projected top 9, and let's just say Jackson's number 10, you could argue Dalton and Maxey are 11 and 12. And if you take out 11 and 12 in this rotation and just replace that with Grimes and move everybody else back, that does change how I view this team in the West pecking order a little bit. So I would even consider a first, to be completely honest. Like I think ideally it's a protected first, lottery protected, top 15 protected, something like that. But I think Grimes is really good. Now you're gonna have to pay him, and I think you have to figure out, does Grimes fit with Austin and Luka? How do you view that trio longer term? But yeah, I would do this in a second. Shout out to Say for becoming a new member. Ali says, would you trade for Norman Powell? I would not. And the primary reason is I just don't think he's good enough defensively. So I guess if it's just a matter of like Gabe and Maxey to make and something else to make the salary work, sure, I'd rather have Norman Powell than Gabe Vincent. But I think on balance, he's a below average defender, and he's also like 6'4"-ish, like 6'3", 6'4". So I just think like undersized shooting guard who is a minus defender. The Lakers already have several players in that ilk within their rotation. So like, yes, I like the offensive fit of Norman Powell, but I think they need to prioritize. They're adding a perimeter player. I think it has to be a clear positive defender, and that is not Norman Powell. Ramaz Aviation, thank you for the super chat. I hope we can do Gabe/Maxey for KCP at the deadline. It will be interesting to see where Memphis is at. I suspect they're going to be in the play-in mix and probably in the back end of the play-in mix. They might not even be in the they might just miss the play-in altogether. But if they are struggling and if they're the 10, 11, 12 seed, there's certainly a possibility that they make KCP available, at which point I would do this in a heartbeat as well. Brendan, are MRI results for Maxi back yet? Yes, JJ said it's just a minor quad injury. We didn't get like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, whatever. He didn't specify the results, but he just said he's out a few days, and they're going to go from there. Giovanni, how did the players react, if so, to you going independent? I don't even know how many people know. I know Austin knows, and Austin has been very supportive of me throughout my career. But I don't even think, like, because nothing is really, at least from the player's perspective, nothing has changed. Like, I was at media day, I've been at practice every day. I'm going to the game tomorrow in Palm Springs. I won't be there Sunday in San Francisco, but I'm going to be at 4 of the 6 preseason games, probably going to go to the first road game in Sacramento. So from me attending things and having the same access, nothing has changed. So I don't think, most of the time the players don't even pay attention to like what outlet you're from. Like if you are a beat reporter, they start to get familiar with you. And if you write something on them, like if you're working on a story with them, maybe they'll want to read it and they'll associate you with an outlet. But it's more so, I think, they know like the media who's around a lot. They know the media who's not around a lot. They know who they like, who they don't like. And I think they judge us or evaluate us more through that lens rather than like which outlet are you with. Of course, I think the TV people, the national like TV people will have a certain, like they're going to know who Stephen A. Smith is and who he works for and like, right. Like that's a different kind of status, but yeah, everything has been everything's been normal so far. Nick Dasilski, would you give Reeves for Kessler? This has been one we've talked about before. So I'll say this. I think Austin is currently the better player. I think you can make a strong, like I think Austin's the better player currently, and it's not close. But I think you can make a strong case that Kessler, as he's younger by several years, he's continuing to grow and develop. I think he can become a better or similar player. And then you could also argue that just based on his skill set and how hard it is to find, I think in many ways, like people have always compared him to Gobert, and I see that comparison. But I think he's more mobile defensively than Gobert. I also think he's a much better finisher and a much more confident. He's got a soft touch with his hook in his post game and just his finishing in the pick and roll. So I think that the thing with Gobert has been teams have been able to stick smalls on him, and he can't punish them with mismatches. He can't punish them with offensive rebounds, as the Lakers saw in Game 5. But really, he only hurt the Lakers offensively in 1 of the 5 games. Maybe there was another game where he had a few offensive rebounds. So it's like 1.5 or maybe 2 of the 5 games. I think if you replace Gobert with Kessler in that series, Kessler's eaten way more against the Lakers front line than Gobert is. So point being, like, I think Kessler is actually more scalable in a playoff context than Gobert is. And so I think this is a tough trade. I've talked about this before. I think Utah would ask for more from LA, and LA would ask for more from Utah. I think both teams would want a first. It's kind of similar to the Trey Murphy, Herb Jones conversation, where on paper it's like a fair-ish trade, but I think both sides would argue they're giving up the better player and want more from the other one. So I would consider it. I would like to see what, like, there was the report, a couple weeks ago or whatever, that they want Reeves and 2 firsts. I would not do that. Lakers can't even trade 2 firsts right now, but that is a ridiculous price. I would consider it, but I think there's like if you're getting Kessler in a first for Reeves, that's interesting to me. If it's Reeves in a first, I think I probably wouldn't do that. Reeves or Kessler just straight up, I think it's close, but you could argue that Kessler is a much better fit longer term with Luka and just like what Luka needs. So I would like. I mean, the Lakers are going to give this 20, 25 games. I'd like to see what Austin and Luka look like with a training camp, with a preseason, with 20 to 25 games together before we start entertaining a real Reeves trade. But I think if you are trading Reeves, that is the caliber of player that I would look for, in my opinion. Rich, thank you for the super chat. Vando's getting buzz, rooting for him. Yeah, he's getting a lot of buzz right now. And I think I just want to see it. Like I'm at the point with everything where we see, like, because I'll go back to last training camp. We were hearing JHS buzz, right? And I'm not saying Vando is JHS. He's a much better player, and I have much more confidence in Vando and how real some of the praise has been. But there always is some stuff in training camp that doesn't really apply to the preseason and or the beginning of the season. And again, to be clear, I'm not saying this is one of those instances. I'm just saying I would like to see some of this stuff translate to game one of the preseason or at some point in the preseason where he's shooting with confidence, he's making his open threes, he is being more effective and confident as a finisher, and then he's defending the way that we know he's capable of defending earlier in his Lakers tenure. If he does those things, then that's a very valuable player who I think will earn his contract and potentially become a positive trade asset again and can be a very big piece of what the Lakers are trying to do this season. If it's more, because it's not the first time we've heard his shot has looked better. I will say it has looked visibly better in terms of the actual like shooting form, and there's a flow to it, and there's a like he has made some changes to the shooting form, but I want to see that translate ultimately. Like I think at this point we've heard every offseason there's been a Vando's worked on his shot. I want to see it in the preseason, but that said, I think the thing that I'm more encouraged by, less even the shot, more so just the way that he's being talked about defensively, because even if he doesn't improve offensively, if he can just be the defensive menace he was 2 years ago, that alone is a very valuable piece in this rotation. Xavier, is this the most optimistic? Thank you for the super chat. Is this the most optimistic you've been since the championship season? I would say this is the most optimistic I've been since since the title defense season. I maintain that title defense team, that was the first team I covered on a full-time basis. Being a Lakers beat reporter, and that team, when AD goes down, they're second in the West. When LeBron goes down, they're third in the West. They're up 2-1 when AD goes down in the first round. I think if any one of those three things, well, I guess, of course, the playoff injury is more important here, but like if either one of those things goes a little different in the regular season, they're potentially top 3, top 4 seed. LeBron maybe wins another MVP. If AD doesn't go down, I think they beat Phoenix, and they had a clear path to getting back to the finals and facing Milwaukee. Giannis was such a beast that postseason run that I don't know how that goes, but they would have had a real shot to beat Milwaukee and potentially go back to back. So I think that team, they still had, remember, they like obviously LeBron and AD, but they still had KCP, Caruso, Kuz. They still had some of the key members of the title team and made some changes with Gasol and Harrell, eventually Drummond, Dennis Schroeder. That team, I think ultimately, like just as a title defense team, I was more confident in, but I would say by far, this is like the closest team to that level in terms of my confidence. And I said, I think this is their best offseason they've had since 2019, which is the summer going into the title season. So I think it's the best offseason they've had in 6 years. And yeah, I would say it's the most confident I've been since the 2020-2021 season. So the most confident I've been in a Lakers roster in 5 years. So make of that what you will. But yeah, I would say definitely since the title defense. Johnny says, welcome to the Vando Vault. Yes, the vault is back open. Omaris Hall, we could have competed for years and years if we kept Caruso and KCP. The Krubot scale does not feature KCP in the name, but I think Caruso and Zubats are the two guys. Like KCP, he's not quite been the same player the last couple of years. I think he's faded a little bit, but Caruso and Zubats to me continue to be the two mistakes that haunt the Lakers. Like those have been the two exact types of players that the LeBron AD teams have needed. Brian Farmer, hey Jovan, what are you expecting stat-wise for DeAndre Ayton? Good question. I'm going to pull up his career numbers here. Just so you guys know, I'm going to go about an hour or so. Knowing me, I will continue to go over an hour, but just wanted to let you guys know. He's a career 16 and 10 and a half guy. He's been a double-double guy every single year of his career. The lowest that was interestingly enough, the finals run year. He averaged 14 and 10 and a half. I will say, and this last year in Portland, I guess technically 14 and a half and 10.2. I'll say he averages, I'll say 17 and 10. If you like put I'll say like 16.8 points and 10.6 rebounds. I think that those are my official DeAndre Ayton projection numbers. Because I think this team's this is the deepest team I think he's ever been on offensively. Like, I think Luka's a lock for 27 at a minimum, but like, I think it's probably going to be closer to 30. I think Luka's probably going to be in that 28 to 30 range. I think Austin will probably be in the 19 to 21 range. I think LeBron will be in the 25 to 27 range, maybe 25, 26. So just those three alone is going to take up a bulk of the scoring. You also have Rui, who I expect to be 12 to 14-ish. And then I think Ayton will be in that like 15 to 17 range. So I think he's going to be the number 4 scorer. Maybe his emergence comes at the expense of Austin a little bit from a scoring perspective, but I think they're going to rely on Austin a lot, especially if LeBron is load managing to some extent. We've seen what Austin's able to do when he's one of the top 2 guys, at least in the regular season. He will put up big numbers. But the Lakers have incredible offensive firepower. Like, I think they should be a top 5, if not top 3 offense. I think the question is really on the defensive end. But one of the underrated aspects of DeAndre Ayton that I haven't seen many people talk about, or I feel like hasn't been emphasized enough at least, is the defensive rebounding. He is a defensive rebounding monster. Not quite AD level, but I think arguably the second best defensive rebounding big they've had in the LeBron era, at least like maybe in competition with, like Andre Drummond was such a rebounding monster that maybe he's technically number 2, but he was only a Laker for half a season. I think if like DeAndre Ayton to me is going to really help the defensive glass, and that's like outside of just the offensive skill and finishing and kind of just giftedness he has compared to Jackson. I think the defensive rebounding is the other area he's really going to help out. 1007 says 22 Braun, 32 Luka, 21 Austin, 6. I'm guessing you mean 16 Ayton, 13 Rui. I'd be pretty surprised if LeBron averages that few points. LeBron is rookie year 20.9. After his rookie year, the fewest amount of points, it was actually last season, 24.4. Yeah, I mean, maybe it goes down a little bit. Before last season, the lowest he had been at was 25. So LeBron basically played 22 years. So he went from year 2 through year 21, averaging 25 plus every single season. That is incredible. That is insane. Mr. TD, LeBron never load manages. Up to this point, he has not. I don't yet have clarity as to what that's going to look like in the regular season, but I mean, he has been a little bit more cautious in previous training camps and preseasons, but we'll see what it looks like. It sounds like that might be changing a little bit, but yeah. Omaris says, Jovan, does the shooting concern you? The shooting concerns me a little bit, and this is one of the pro Rui arguments. I will say, though, and this is another thing that I think people need to factor in. I think people think too much of the offensive end when they think about the starters. But I also think Austin shot just under 40% on catch and shoot threes last year. LeBron was over 40% on catch and shoot threes. So if you're saying the base of the starting offense is Luka, Ayton, pick and roll, and then LeBron and Austin as off-ball threats, you have 2 40% three-point shooters in the regular season, plus the Luka, Ayton pick and roll. That other guy, like, sure, it's great if it's Rui, who's another 40+% catch and shoot guy, but even if it's a guy like Smart, who's probably more of a mid-30s to high 30s catch and shoot guy, like, I think that the gap between Smart and Rui as a spot-up guy versus the gap in between them defensively, particularly in their ability to defend backcourt players, I think it's a much bigger gap defensively than it is offensively. So that's my read with that. The shooting in general is a little concerning. We've seen Austin. I think it's more so a playoff concern because LeBron has tended to deal with these lower extremity injuries later in the season, and that has affected. Like he still was, I think, 37% as a catch and shoot guy last year against Minnesota, but we have seen LeBron not be as effective offensively due to injury later in the season. Austin's legs have been shot the last two postseasons. That's a continued concern of just how he can hold up. Luka obviously dealt with the flu or whatever ended up happening with him, food poisoning, and that impacted him a bit. And then Rui's been the one guy who's been a consistent shooter, so that's a plus. But you have Jake LaRavia, who scaled up last season in percentage, but his volume has been pretty low. He's been 2 3-point attempts per game in about like 20 minutes. So I'd like to see LaRavia scale up in terms of volume. And then Dalton and Gabe were both, if you look at their monthly splits, both guys were like roller coasters or waves where some months they were hot, some months they were cold. And so there's a lack of consistency there. So I think I would say in general, I think by far for me, the defense is the biggest concern with this group. I would say number 2 is probably the shooting, but I think with Rui, with Austin and LeBron maybe playing a little bit more off the ball, if LaRavia can scale up into a larger role, Gabe and Dalton are still like plus shooters overall. I think they have enough, but there is that is probably my second biggest concern after, of course, like health, I guess is maybe number 1, then defense, then shooting. Mr. TD, Luka and LeBron are great defensive rebounders as well. Yeah, I was more so talking about like centers specifically, that's been a bit of an issue for this group, especially looking at a guy like Jackson. But yeah, they have, I mean, with Luka, LeBron, if Rui's like the 4th best rebounder in your lineup, I think that's a pretty good rebounding lineup. And then Austin has been a good rebounder for a guard. So I think the Lakers are going to be a pretty good defensive rebounding team next year. Nick Dasilski, is it too crazy to try to get Kuminga? I think so. I think there's a lot of red flags with Kuminga and this situation and how he views himself. And I think he's better than Golden State seems to think he is, or at least the coaching staff seems to think he is. But there are real concerns with his game and just, I think the way, like he wants to be a top 2 or 3 option on a team. And I don't think that's happening in LA, at least with the current group. Quabena says, will JJ run the 2 big lineup, Ayton and Hayes or Kleba in there? I don't think it'll be Ayton and Hayes because spacing is a real issue with those 2 together, but I could see Ayton and Kleba and or Hayes and Kleba in certain 2 big lineups. Kleba with the floor spacing, I think could be something of a stretch 4, which really nowadays, like every 4 is really a stretch 4. Most teams aren't playing. Even like OKC, it's like Chet is kind of a stretch 4 offensively when he's playing with Hartenstein. So I think most teams, if they're starting 2 bigs or even like whoever's the nominal 4 in the lineup is typically a floor spacing player. So I think Kleba could play in some bench lineups. I think Crane just had a tweet that Kleba's actually defended. He's been more of a 4 defensively than a 5 looking at his lineup data defensively. And that he is a guy who's been used on the perimeter a lot. Like I remember back in the day when they were playing the Clippers, he would be guarding sometimes Kawhi. Like he can guard out on the perimeter, especially if it's like a bigger, slower wing. He used to be able to hang with them. I don't know about now. We'll have to see that at some point this season. But I could see Ayton and Kleba or Hayes and Kleba in second unit groups. Ramas, do you think we make it back to the Western Conference Finals or further in 2024 if Ham doesn't exist? Maybe. I think so. It depends how we want to, like, there's the butterfly effect, right? Like you change one thing and there's this, all these things change. So if we're saying they fire him after the 2023 season, I think there's an alternate reality where they have a better regular season in 2023-24 and they're not the 7th seed again and playing Denver in round 1. I think if we're judging this through the Denver lens, I think there were certain saying buttons and pushing at the same time. There were certain buttons he could have pushed better. I know LA led that series for 70%, but there was just some type of mental hurdle that they had with Denver where they got clammy and just they clenched up in crunch time against them. So I think they probably could have extended that past, 5. They probably could have pushed it to 6 or 7. I don't know that they win with that roster against Denver. I think it could have been more competitive with a different coach. But I think if we want to like really take it back, I think they should have been better than a 7 seed. And if they were better than a 7 seed, they're not playing Denver in round 1. And then you're in position to potentially go on a deeper run. Because I think Denver was really the team that gave them a bunch of like, could they have had a Dallas type run? Maybe. Now, I think more likely is like they probably win a round and then lose in round 2. But I think they would have been in a different position entirely if they weren't starting Taurean Prince over Rui and benching Austin and benching D'Lo and just some of the wild things that happened that season. Young Claire, who gets traded most likely in the new year? I think it's still Gabe and Maxi are the 2 leaders in the clubhouse. Johnny Smart is not better than Vando defensively. I don't think that necessarily. Like I'll say he's graded out better than him more recently. I think at the peak, Vando is a better defender, but Smart, the gap, whatever gap there exists defensively, and I think it's relatively small, the gap offensively is much larger. Young Claire, who do you think plays tomorrow night? I think the 10 guys are going to play, barring someone. Now, they didn't tell us. What was a little frustrating is the Maxi injury happened in the first practice, and we spoke to JJ after the first practice, and he didn't relay that the Maxi injury had happened. We didn't find out until after the second practice, and it was like, oh yeah, he got injured yesterday and we kept him out today. And it was like, well, you could have told us that yesterday, that when we asked you who participated, like if everyone was available or whatnot. So I don't know if there was another thing that happened that we haven't found out about yet. Barring that, I think the 10 guys that are expected to play will play. But I think it'll be, as JJ said, short bursts. He said he doesn't want guys playing 8 to 10 minutes. So I think the starting group tomorrow will be DeAndre Ayton, Rui, Jake LaRavia, Austin, and Luka. I think the primary bench lineup will be Gabe, Dalton, Vando, Jackson, and who am I missing? I guess Bronny is technically the 10th guy of the roster players. So that'll be like the top 9 or 10 players for tomorrow. John Miller, yo. I don't hear people talking about this a lot. What do you think Jackson will look like this year in his rightful place as a backup big? He was balling for a month or more last year. Yeah, Jackson had a really impressive 6-week stretch where he played the best basketball of his career. And I think in a certain role, he can be really effective as a backup, especially in either Austin, but I think more specifically Luka-led bench units. If you think about the Luka and the Banshees lineup last year, if you go Luka and Jackson as the pick and roll bread and butter of that second unit group, and then you have maybe LaRavia, maybe it's LaRavia, Vando, and Smart. So you got 3 guys who I think are all plus defenders. You got 1 really good shooter in LaRavia, 1 like above average shooter in Smart, 1 negative. You do have some spacing concerns with Vando and with Hayes, but it's against bench groups. You still have Luka, Smart, and LaRavia. Like you should be able to get by. Maybe you could put in Rui in that lineup just to juice up the offense a little bit more. But I think that's a way to unlock Jackson. Like I think playing him and Luka as much together as possible, tying him to Luka. My approach, if I was JJ and the coaching staff, would be going more matchup based. I think there will be certain teams that, depending on how, like if you're switching everything and you're just switching a guard onto or a wing onto Jackson, I think you can neutralize him a bit. I think the Lakers could have some better counters, but like in general, he's most effective against teams that are going to be in coverage where Luka could get downhill against the drop big and you're going to hit Jackson for the lob. So I think there are certain teams, depending on their bench personnel, depending on their defensive schemes, where it makes sense to go Jackson. And then I think the switching teams and some of the more perimeter-based teams, I think that's maybe where it makes more sense to go with Maxi Kleba, who I think is a bit more of a switchable, versatile defender, and then also is a floor spacer. And I think you can attack those schemes a little bit more effectively with him out there. So I think I would go with more of a backup, matchup-based approach with the backup centers. But I think Jackson is going to be properly slotted as a backup. And I think depending on how they do the rotation, like I think he could be really effective in Luka lineups. But I also think he needs some, especially if they're doing a lot of switching in those groups, I think he needs the requisite defensive help. And that's where, again, if you have Smart, Laravia, Vando next to him and Luka, I think you cover up for some of the limitations there. Fred, is Jake our biggest X factor? I would rank the Lakers' biggest X factors as, I think, DeAndre Ayton number 1, Marcus Smart number 2, Jake number 3. I just think DeAndre Ayton, if he's back to being the Phoenix level of DeAndre Ayton, like that to me is, because we saw how impactful Jackson was for those 6 weeks. I just think like DeAndre Ayton is so much more skilled and talented on both sides of the ball that if you get a version of him who is engaged and is setting good screens and is rolling and is finishing everything and is getting offensive rebounds and is attacking mismatches and then defensively is bought in, and whether he's switching or they're playing up to touch or whatever defensive scheme they want to use, I think he's a better rim protector overall than Jackson. Definitely a much better defensive rebounder and post defender than Jackson. And so I think there is a universe where DeAndre Ayton, as to quote himself, like with his career kind of in the balance this season, if he can be the version of him we saw in the early 2020s, that dude was a good player. He was a really effective part of that finals run. And I think that's a guy who could make a real difference with this team. Like I just think his ceiling is higher than Marcus and Jake's. So that's where I think Ayton can be that really big swing piece of like, I think the best version of Ayton can challenge Austin for the third best player on the team. Like I think in most scenarios, Austin is going to clearly be the third best player on the team, but the best version of Ayton, like people were talking about him as like a top 30 player at that time. And I'm not saying he's going to get back to being that player, but there was a time where people were very, very high on DeAndre Ayton. You got a max contract. That was only a few years ago. So I think more likely than not, he's not. I'm not saying he's going to get back to that, but I still think if we're ranking every player's ceiling, I still think he has either the third or fourth highest ceiling on this team, probably the fourth. Smart and Laravia, I think their ceilings are a bit lower. But what I will say with Laravia, and I made this point before, like there is a scenario in which he is their best two-way player of just like looking at who's contributing positively on both sides of the ball. I think he's going to certainly be a positive contributor offensively, connecting piece, good shooter, smart player, can attack closeouts, can do a little bit of everything. I'm not worried about the offensive end. I think the defensive end is where, just depending on how they use him, I have some questions, but I think he's a versatile defender who could defend multiple positions, and we've seen him defend Jokic, Tatum, De'Aaron Fox. Like he's defended a spectrum of players. So I think he's in the mix, but I think Marcus Smart and just his perimeter defense, and then Ayton and his skill set, I would probably peg those guys a little bit higher. But I think Jake has a real possibility to be their seventh man and a really important piece. Jeff, thank you for the super chat. Do the Lakers still have patience on Dalton as a future? Is this pick player? I'm not sure what you mean by PC. Yeah, I think that the Lakers are maintaining a certain level of patience and confidence with Dalton. At the same time, I thought it was rather revealing that JJ didn't mention him in the guard mix as players who are guaranteed playing time. And the point I made yesterday is that we can debate whether Dalton's more of a 2 or a 3, but he's not more of a forward than Jake LaRavia is. Jake LaRavia is taller, he is heavier, he is stronger, he is used to guarding up more than Dalton is. So my read on JJ's comments yesterday were there are 5 backcourt players guaranteed minutes, and Dalton is not one of them. So he did say it's a competition. So he did not say it's set in stone, and there is a path still for Dalton to carve out a role. But I thought it was rather telling that he was not included in that initial group. And it checks out with how I viewed the situation dating back to the beginning of the offseason, where just looking at it, I felt it was hard to make a case for Dalton being above the 10th man in the rotation again. And even then, that's with him ahead of a backup center, which I think JJ's made it clear he wants to play a backup center this year, compared to what they were doing last season. So I as of now, view Dalton as the 11th guy. Lakers could easily go with 11 players on a nightly basis, and you're going to have injuries. You're going to maybe have LeBron load managing, or Marcus load managing, or you don't know what's going to happen with some of the injury prone guys or older guys on the roster. But I think there is a level of patience with Dalton, but I also think there's a level of he needs to show. I think he needs to show it soon. Otherwise, he could be a trade chip, or he just could be not really a part of the future if he doesn't show it at some point. Sam says, I think we bring in Haywood Highsmith and Keon Johnson if we can't get Wiggins, as well as Nick Richards as a backup 5. I'm fine with Nick Richards as a backup 5. I've talked about this before. I thought it was a little concerning. He didn't flame out in Phoenix, but I don't think Phoenix loved him. And I've said this before, I think specifically with him, but sometimes you have guys in lottery situations who we project, we kind of wish cast what they could be in a winning situation or a better situation. Then they get to it and they don't really perform, or they don't live up to expectations. And I feel like Nick Richards is kind of like that. Now, is he better than Jackson and Kleba? Probably, at least probably at a similar level to Jackson. But I guess for splitting hairs, I'd probably rather have Nick Richards, but it might be closer than you think, despite some of his numbers. I would like Haywood Highsmith or Keon Johnson. Do you mean Keldon Johnson or? Yeah, but either way, I mean, Wiggins still to me is the one to try and go after. MJ, do you think LeBron's elite defense from post-trade deadline carries over to this season? I would say actually going back to December-ish, mid-December was when LeBron turned things around defensively, and then it carried over through the rest of most of the season. And he just had a ridiculous workload last year. I think it should carry over. I wonder if LeBron, maybe to the earlier conversation about the offense and the scoring, maybe LeBron takes a little bit of a step back and he is more of that. I just can't see LeBron averaging fewer than 22, 23. Even that feels low, to be completely honest. But maybe he does take a slight step back offensively and has to expend that energy on defense. But it is a lot to ask of a 41-year-old. And I think you could make a case if the Lakers go with the current projected starting lineup that LeBron is their best defender. And I do not want my defense to come down to a 41-year-old giving maximum effort every single night. That's just not, to me, a sustainable defensive approach. But that might just be how it is. Sam Davison, I like what I've seen out of Jake. Yes, Jake and Vando, I think, have been the two guys who have gotten the most praise, and I think Jake is. I'm very high on Jake. Mr. TD, who did the Lakers just pick up? Was it Keon Johnson? Are you talking about Nick Smith Jr.? Unless I'm missing something here. Also, I forgot. Here we go. Thank you, John Paul. This was the best part of the Luka availability. I forgot to mention this. Luka was asked what his first training camp as a Laker, if you had to describe it in 3 words. Shout out to Edwin Garcia who asked that question. But Luka said fun, excitement, and hard. It's Michael Scott would have some fun with that one. Ryan Rich, Jovan, what's your favorite NBA arena and least favorite? Favorite arena. Well, there's a couple answers here. Are we talking like arena in terms of just how nice it is and the experience of being there? Or are we talking about like the atmosphere and watching a game there? Because I think I have a couple different answers. I would just probably default to Madison Square Garden. There's just something about that arena, the presentation, the atmosphere, the celebrities there. But there's just like this buzz in the arena that's really fun. I would say TD Garden is second, probably just because I've covered some crazy Lakers Celtics games there and just the history of the Lakers Celtics rivalry. And it's a very drunk and rowdy crowd. So I would say Boston and New York are probably my two favorite road arenas and environments for obvious reasons. I don't think either one of those is surprising. Least favorite, I got to go with Charlotte, probably. I feel like Charlotte is just it's like 70% full and the crowd is pretty lifeless. And it's just, I'm trying to think. Utah's had some rough crowds, but they hate the Lakers, so they're always get up for those a little bit more. New Orleans has had some bad crowds. But I would say Charlotte is probably the one that I'm like the least excited for in terms of a road environment or like just watching a road game. L7 Kicker says, I want to support you, but you don't make sense. Would love to know what you're talking about here. And talk it out. Let's talk it out. David Parks, hello, Jovan. You think a Kamara or Herb Jones trade is realistic? I don't think a Kamara trade is realistic. I've heard, and I've said this before, I think Portland has a really high asking price for Kamara. And I think he's just a keeper for what they're trying to do. Herb Jones, I think, could be potentially available. I've said, to me, Phoenix and New Orleans are two situations to monitor throughout the start to first quarter, first third of the season, where those are two guys I think, those are two teams rather that I think have probably playoff aspirations, but I view them both as like back end play-in teams at best and probably missing the play-in altogether. So if Phoenix or New Orleans pivots at some point in like the December to February range, I could see a guy like Dylan Brooks or maybe a Royce O'Neal becoming available. And then with New Orleans, do they just pull the plug and say Trey Murphy or Herb Jones is available? At which point there's any way to get Herb Jones without giving up. I mean, you're not giving up Luka, of course, but if you could keep Austin and add a Herb Jones, I think he's the perfect third guy to unlock and connect with Austin and Luka and make that a formidable trio, formidable starting and closing trio moving forward. And I would give up a pick. I would give up whatever New Orleans wants outside of ideally giving up Austin. I think that would be a home run for the Lakers. Mr. TD, Golden State just doesn't have the same, I would say in terms of arena niceness, Golden State is in the mix. I would say Atlanta's in the mix, Sacramento's in the mix. Some of the newer arenas are in the mix. Golden State, I don't think, I have been to Roracle many times. I was there for Clippers Warriors with the Sterling, or the Sterling tapes just dropped. I was out there to cover that. And that was like one of the craziest games I've ever covered from an atmosphere perspective, because they almost felt bad for the Clippers because the Clippers took their warm-ups off, threw it on the court. Like, it was a whole thing. And that was obviously a really big moment in NBA history. But Roracle used to be wild and it used to be deafening. Chase is not like that. So it's still like probably, I would say, an above average crowd, but it's nowhere near. It used to be arguably the best crowd in the league, or a top 5, top 3 crowd. And it's no longer like that. So I would say from that, the atmosphere isn't quite what it used to be, but it is I will say from a convenience perspective, it is one of my favorite road stops because it's just a quick, 50-minute flight. Kevin, midseason trade idea, Max plus Gabe plus DK for Dayron plus Man plus Highsmith, LAL gets a second 3-and-D guy and backup 5. Nets gets a young guy, DK, and get off Man contract. Okay, let me process this for a second here. So Maxi, Gabe, Dalton for Dayron. So you're upgrading the backup center spot. Man and Highsmith, which I would both say are upgrades over Gabe and Dalton. I'm assuming you did the math here with the salaries working. Assuming the salaries work, I would do this trade in a heartbeat. I would do that. And Man also can replace Gabe as that secondary. I don't think Gabe's going to be a primary creator with, I think at best, he's the Lakers' fifth best ball handler / creator. And I think there's a decent gap, of course, between him and the top 3, but even Marcus. I think Marcus is underrated in that regard as like a 4 to 5 assist a night type guy. So yeah, I would do this in a second. I think you might have to throw in a second or a swap. It's not a swap, but maybe a second just for optics. But yeah, you're getting a couple of expirings plus Dalton as like a younger piece. And then, I like that a lot. Brian, Jovan, what would you consider to be a good year for Bronny? I think a good year for Bronny would be, I project him outside of the primary rotation. So I don't want to say like earning a rotation spot because I don't know how realistic that is. But I think there will be, just like with any player during the course of a season, there will be times he gets an opportunity. And maybe Gabe is out or Marcus is out or Austin's, like whoever's out. Someone's out and the rotation is reordered and he's in there. And I would just like to see him look like a NBA caliber, like back end rotation guy. I think the early moments last season were pretty rough. And I think you go back to that game in January when AD gets injured in Philly and they threw out Bronny and he just did not look ready for that moment. He did not look like a rotation caliber player. I thought from that or around that point, he'd already started playing better in the G League, but like right before then, and then like past that point, he crushed it in the G League and looked really, really good and looked much improved. And then I thought later in the season, in some garbage time or just like end of season shifts, he looked better and more comfortable. I would like to see that earlier in the season, in the early to mid portion, whenever he gets his opportunity, and like just to, I think, defend with a certain hunger and urgency that we haven't always seen from him defensively, and then to show what he can do offensively. And I think he started to show that more. So I think for him, it's not a certain number of games or minutes or certain statistical benchmarks. I think it's more of a visual thing of just like how comfortable does he look, and do you see the kernels of a future backup point guard? Because I think that right now is what he projects out to be if he continues to grow and hit maybe his tentative ceiling. It's probably, I think he can grow into being a rotation backup point guard, which for the 55th pick is actually, I think, a win for the Lakers or wherever else he potentially plays in the future. So yeah, I think it's more so just like I think it's more the eye test with Bronny of how is he running the offense, his command, his confidence, his communication, but then also defensively, is there a sense of disruption and urgency? Because as he said, I've referenced this a few times, but as he said back at the summer league practice back in July, he knows he's only going to get on the floor with his defense. And I would like to see a little bit more from him on that end. Thomas, what is your ideal rotation with the current group? My ideal rotation would be, I've already stated my starting group, so I would go Ayton. If we're going offense, it would be Ayton, LeBron, Marcus, Austin, Luka. If we're going defense, it would be Ayton, LeBron, Luka, or maybe Luka technically even at the 4, LeBron at the 3, Austin, and Smart. And so those 5 as the starters. I would go Rui as a 6th man, Laravia as the 7th man, Vando as the 8th man, Gabe as the 9th man. I would go matchup based with Jackson and Maxey as the 10th man and the backup center. I would go Dalton as the 11th guy. and maybe a one shift player to start, and then kind of see if you could squeeze him into a second shift. And that would be my ideal rotation. And I guess to go a little bit more specific, like building out lineups, I like the pairing of LeBron and Austin together. I think those two have a really good chemistry and synergy that they've developed over the years. And then Luka with maybe like Laravia and Rui to just give him some additional, or maybe some Luka Ayton. But I think Luka probably has to be tied more to Jackson to make him more viable, and like they have their connection. So I would like to then see it staggered a bit where Luka has his lineups, LeBron and Austin have their lineups, and then of course you are closing your starting games and closing halves with those three playing together. So I think those three need to be playing together 18, 20 minutes a night, something like that, at least 15, but ideally closer to like 18, 20. Omaris, how about Intuit Dome? Very nice arena. It's in that mix for nicest arena in the league. The atmosphere, it's a little, I've talked about this before, but as someone who formerly covered the Clippers, like I think I can speak to it. Like the Clippers, I think it's sensory overload over there. They I think overdo it a little bit with the lights and the sounds and the volume, and it's I feel like I leave Clipper games kind of with like a headache or almost just like a bit overstimulated. So I think it's good for if you have kids and it's more like a family friendly environment that's entertaining for kids or younger fans. But for adults, I think it could be a little much. So I think anytime they play the Lakers, they're going to get up for that, and they have the wall now and all that stuff. But I wouldn't put it at the top. I would put it near the top for sure with just like how nice the arena is. It might be the nicest arena in the league. And they have a really nice media section now, and the food, and they got like chefs cooking stuff, and it's all fancy. But from an environment perspective, I would put it above average, but I don't know if I'd even go top 10. I probably wouldn't. So yeah, somewhere maybe in that like 11 to 15 range. Kurt Affair, Jovan, what arena has the best food? I think easily it's Detroit, because they're Little Caesars and they serve Little Caesars, but they have an insane dessert bar. They got ice cream, they got brownies, cookies. So you will leave with a stomach ache and feeling sluggish. And it's not the best food to go cover a game or talk to people after, but definitely Detroit. I think it's a very gluttonous, satiating. Smokey, don't you want to save Dalton for a better trade? I think this is in relation to the Brooklyn trade. Yeah, I mean, everything's relative though, right? Like it depends what he's potentially available for. Who should you rather trade if you could keep AR and Rui, Herb or Trey Murphy III? I think Trey Murphy's ceiling is higher, but Herb, I think, fits better next to Austin. Well, they both fit really well next to. I think Trey's defense isn't quite as good as some people think it is. And I think he's closer to like average defensively, maybe slightly above average, where Herb is a real like all defense caliber guy. The issue with Herb is his health and his shooting. Mr. TD, how are the trees around Intuit? Interestingly, I haven't seen any trees around Intuit. So this Paradox says here, too much aspiration. BK Design, barring any injuries, how do you feel about the current group for the first 20-25 games that Rob set the evaluation line? Also sent you a DM on Discord about potential help for your server. I appreciate that. And as a reminder, I think it's in the description tab on YouTube, but we just also launched a Discord, which is there's going to be a public section of the Discord. Then for the members, there's going to be a section for each tier. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, etc. So I appreciate that, and I will check that out. I'm still learning how to use Discord, to be completely honest. Like I just joined it a couple months ago, and it is a little overwhelming for me. It takes me a second to kind of understand a new platform, but I'm working on it and trying to get that going consistently, leading into opening night. But I appreciate you and those who have already joined and started to send me messages and friend requests. Barring injuries, how do I feel about the current group? I feel good. I think also looking at the schedule gods did the Lakers some favors with the start. I think it's a relatively friendly schedule for the Lakers especially compared to the last few years. It feels like the Lakers have had murderer's row to the first 8, 10, 12, 15 games. They've just had brutal starts. And this year it feels a little bit more palatable in terms of just I we could pull it up here and just go through it quickly. I'll put it on here for the YouTube viewers, but looking at it, so home Golden State, excuse me, that'll be like opening night. Lakers have a not the best history on opening night, let's say, but LeBron, Steph, that'll be a fun one. You have Minnesota, rematch of the first round. That's going to be another tough one, but then at Sacramento, I think that's a very winnable road game. Home Portland should be a winnable game. At Minnesota, so second time playing Minnesota. Like, I guess the start's actually a little bit tougher than I thought, but after that, at Memphis, home Miami, at Portland, home San Antonio, at Atlanta, at Charlotte. That first, 11 games, like I think the Lakers should be 7-4, 8-3, something like that. And then at OKC is the first real test of the season. And I've said that's one of the games I'm looking forward to most, just because I think that's a real barometer, a real measuring stick game of just where LA is at New Orleans, at Milwaukee, Utah, at Utah. So like, I think these first 15, 16 games, LA should be at least 11-5, 12-4, something like that. So I feel pretty good. David Parks, a reunion with Goodwin would be great. Who would you send out for Goodwin and Allen/Royce in a trade? I'd prefer Royce between the two. In terms of Allen versus Royce, just I want to make sure I have the correct numbers. So I'm pulling up the Suns cap situation. So Goodwin is making just under 2.4. Royce is making 10.1. Allen's making 16.9. So also just factoring in salary, I'd rather have Royce. So if we get Roy, I mean, you could get there with Gabe or Maxey, and you take on like they might need to throw in something else, I guess. I mean, you don't really have much to throw in from like a vet minimum perspective. I would have to crunch the numbers to see how close this would get them to passing the first apron, but you can roughly get there with, I think, Maxey or Gabe. Mr. TD, Lakers are 1-6 on opening night, last 7 games. I mean, yeah, there you go. 902 Legend, who/what trades are you personally looking for the Lakers to make, if any? I've been on record. I'm pro Wiggins and the Wiggins trade, especially if there's a way you could do it without Rui. I'm skeptical they can do it without Rui, but if you can, even better. Dylan Brooks, I'm sort of open to. Again, to go back to earlier, Phoenix and New Orleans are two situations I would monitor. I'm not the biggest Dylan Brooks fan, especially with the offensive end. I think he can be a destructive player on that end, but if he can buy into a role, and I do wonder, like, if you're putting Dylan Brooks with Marcus Smart and DeAndre Ayton, and you have these players who, and even like a Jackson, like you just have some players that you have some questions about the seriousness at times, like that could be problematic. But I guess Dylan Brooks would be in the mix to a lesser extent. Ochai Agbaji from Toronto is someone I really like. Either of the New Orleans wings. There's Josh Green from Charlotte, depending on the price. Like those are some of the names. Keon Ellis, that's who I was. There's the Keon Johnson thing earlier. I was forgetting, but either Keon Ellis. I don't know if you meant Keldon Johnson or Keon Ellis, but I like Keon Ellis too. Matthew Wilson, do you like a Harrison Barnes or Keldon Johnson trade? That would help our bench. I'll pull up the Spurs contracts. I mean, yes, in theory, either one of those guys would help the bench. Keldon is making These are their total contracts. Keldon is making 17.5, and then he has 17.5 the following season. Harrison is making 19, and he's an expiring. So you could potentially do something like Gabe and Maxi for Harrison, which I would do, or Gabe or Maxi plus Dalton for Keldon or something like that. Again, I have to crunch the actual numbers in the trade machine. Might be a little bit off there, but yeah, either one of these guys would be good. I just don't see why San Antonio gives up on them. I think especially Harrison looks to be probably their starting 4 right now, and they don't really have another guy to replace him. So I think Harrison is probably someone they're going to try to keep. Jan, hey Jovan, are there changes in the coaching staff? I don't think to the main coaching staff. I know they've changed some stuff with the player development a little bit, but to my knowledge, they're returning all of the, and I believe they announced it. If we look at, let me pull it up here quickly. They announced the coaching staff at Media Day. So let me pull up. I tweeted that out. Yeah, so JJ's head coach, associate head coach is Nate, assistant coaches Scott Brooks, Bob Byer, Greg St. Jean, Lindsey Harding, and Bo Levesque. I'm looking, I mean, Ty Abbott's still there. Justin Robinson is the new player development coach from Duke. Yeah, so the primary people are all the same, other than Justin Robinson. Kevin, will you do, thank you for the super chat, will you do a trade of Maxi plus Gabe plus a first for Brooks? I don't think the Lakers would do that. I mean, if you could do like a top 20 protected or top 15 protected, I would maybe consider it. I mean, you're basically giving up nothing in your rotation or really upgrading from Gabe to Brooks. But a first is they only have one first to trade. I don't know. I don't think they would do that. I think the barometer to give up a first is going to be high. 902 Legend, any realistic chance at Kessler at this point? I don't think so. Unless they're willing to trade Austin. Drip Show, thank you for the super chat. What do you think the Clippers not calling on certain reporters to avoid aspiration questions? Look, I try to refrain from touching on my history or my past, but I'll say I'm not well liked over there right now. There was a time I reported some stuff that they were not happy about, and I saw my access and my ability to ask questions be affected as well. So it's not surprising. This is how they move. This is how they operate. I don't want to go too down this road, but if you guys remember, I had the chemistry story on the Clippers in the first season of Kawhi and Paul George. I actually had 2 chemistry stories, and let's just say it did not go over well, and I felt some consequences. We'll leave it at that. Jamar, how did the Lakers get Miles Bridges? It's possible. I think you could do something along the line. Like, I think he's in the mid-20s contract-wise. I will say, I've said this before, and it just has to be said with a guy like Miles Bridges, like there is an optic part of this so he's making 25. He actually has the descending contract, so he's making 22.9 next year, 22.826. He's a guy, you're going to have to answer some tough questions based on the allegations in his past, and that's just when you trade. Like the Lakers had to do that with Jackson Hayes as well when they signed him. So it's just that there is a round of like, why were you willing to look past this, or why are you willing to accept this from this player that will just pop up? And that's just another consideration that you have to weigh when you acquire a player. I think it depends on what Charlotte is trying to do, how good they are. If they are exceeding expectations and are like a play-in team, he's probably a big part of that. for 25 million, you could get there with Maxey, Gabe, and Dalton. So that's another one. Robert Rockley, would you try to do a trade for Benedict Mathurin? He's got the Canadian flag there. Yeah, I mean, for a certain, like, I guess it just depends on the price. I've said I'm a little skeptical of Indiana. Like, they already lost Miles Turner and were reportedly trying to keep him. Like, they are in a pretty good position to bounce back not this season, but next season with Tyrese Halliburton making a full recovery. So if you are stripping it down, like Indiana famously hates tanking. If you look at the last like 30 plus years, they are rarely, I think their lowest win total is in like the high 20s. Like, they're not one of these teams that bottoms out. They like being competitive every single year, and they have an impressive track record of doing that. So I don't think they want to punt on the season, and I don't think they want to punt on the future, which I think you kind of would be if you're flipping Mathurin for a lesser player or kind of selling him. So there's I think a question of like, how does he fit long term with not with Mathurin, but with Neesmith and with Nemhard and just the overall team. But he was a big part of the finals run, and he is one of the better bench scorers in the league. And I'm sure he wants to start at some point full time, and maybe that happens in Indiana. But point being, I would try to trade for him. I just don't know how gettable he is right now. Zacchaeus J, can you see Bronny filling the role of point of attack defender? Eventually, potentially. This season, I'm a little skeptical. I just don't. I think the Lakers, based at least on JJ's comments, are going to primarily use Marcus and Vando in that role. I do not see Bronny being better than either one of them defensively. I don't see him being better than Gabe defensively. I think there's like a narrow path to that happening. And if that happens, then maybe, like I've said, I think the one way Bronny can usurp Gabe in the rotation is he has to either be a much better shooter or a better defender. I think the defender path is probably more realistic, but I still am skeptical of him taking that role. Now, could he be that maybe the following season? I think there's a path to that, but I would also like to see just a higher level of defense from him in general before we put him there. But I think that's what he would like to become, and I think that's what the Lakers would like for him to become on the defensive side. On the offensive side, I think they're still figuring out like what exactly he's going to be. Jovan, any concern on our 10th to 15th man? They don't play, but it looks thin. I mean, this has been a concern going on multiple years, maybe since the title defense, the 10th to 15th man spot on the roster. I will say, if we say that Jackson is the 10th man, let's say it's Jackson 10, Dalton 11, Maxey 12. I think that's much better than they've had in recent seasons. I like the top 9 better than in recent seasons. So I do think this team is deeper, and particularly deeper in like the top to middle portion of the bench than they've been in recent seasons. But I'm not going to lie. And it's really 10th to 14th man because they don't have a 15th player. Like, yeah, the back end of the roster tends to be concerning and not really like players that you would feel comfortable throwing in there necessarily. But I do think it's better than it has been in recent seasons. There's not a Maxwell Lewis JHS situation here. So I think it is better. Mr. TD, Lakers did a great job filling out their roster based on their assets this season, this offseason. I agree. I think the only like semi knock I have is that I still think the not ever making a trade thing is a little bit. I disagree with that. 3 straight off seasons, no trades. I think they should have tried to get off of the Maxey or Gabe contract, but that's a minor gripe compared to the success of the offseason. Bob, do you think Adu will play a preseason game this year? I do. I do think Adu will play a preseason game, barring him having a setback, which I can't. Based on what's been reported, based on what I've heard, I think he will play. But with the Lakers, you always got to be careful. Jamar, how good is Nick Smith Jr.? Do you think he gets burned? I think he does get burned, and I think he actually is a sneak. Like, I think there's a path to Nick Smith Jr. potentially, especially if he could be a more reliable offensive player or shooter, maybe jumping Bronny and maybe even jumping Gabe. So I think he's a little bit of a wild card X factor toward the end of, technically not on the bench, a two-way guy, but Drip Show says, my bad, wasn't trying to put you on the spot. All good, man. I try to refrain from the Clippers stuff because it is I can get it in some trouble with depending on what I say. Johnny, a dude looks like a running back. He might, not even might. I think he's the most. Well, depends. I was gonna say he's the most athletic player on the team. But you do have LeBron, and Bronny's very athletic, but it's probably a do. Jay asks, how did the Lakers get Luka Doncic? I that's one we didn't think was possible, and it happened. Mr. TD, is this the first time LeBron isn't the most athletic on his team? I'm trying to think if there was a more athletic Laker at some point. I mean, maybe. And it's purely an age thing, really. All right, I'm going to go 5 minutes, and then we will wrap here. Mr. TD, maybe Dwight. I don't think Dwight at that point of his career was more athletic, but you can make a case prime Dwight. Although, I mean, dude, watch LeBron's Cleveland highlights, and it looks like he's on 2 times speed, and it's just, normal. Like he looks like, yeah, it's insane. Otto, love Luka being the vocal leader now and seems to have that same joy and passion he did in Dallas. What would you think of pairing him with Lauri from Utah? I would like it. I think the issue would be it probably costs you probably got to do Austin in a first, and I don't even know if that gets it done. I think Utah probably wants more, and the Lakers just don't have more to offer. So I don't see the Lakers being able to get Lauri, at least as currently constructed, like with their current assets. But I would like that pairing. I still have some questions about Lauri defensively and like what he's either a 3 or a 4, but he's not quite strong enough, I feel like, to be a full-time 4 depending on your makeup, but then he's also not quick enough to be a full-time 3. He's kind of a tweener. Now, he does have length and athleticism, so you could probably get by. I think he's probably ideally more of a secondary defender than a primary defender. So the ideal, it would be like Luka, Lauri, a good rim-running, shot-blocking center, and then probably like a point of attack 3-and-D guard and a point of attack or a wing defender 3-and-D wing, and that's like the optimal lineup, in my opinion. JS, what centers can the Lakers get for a backup? I mean, I think their backup situation is kind of set for now unless they make a trade. I'm still high on Koloko and his upside, so I would like to see what he looks like in the preseason. And I think he's a much better rim protector and just defender than Hayes or this version of Kleba. So if they really want to prioritize I think he might be the one closest to doing what DeAndre Ayton could do on both sides of the ball. And I'm not nowhere near as talented or skilled as Ayton offensively, but just like kind of replicating that role, I think it might be him more so than either of the other 2 backup 5s if they want some level of like continuity schematically. That said, he's a 2-way guy, so I think there's going to be a clear limitation to just how much he plays and how much he's used. But yeah, I think it would have to come in the form. Like, I think my ideal outcome for the Lakers this season is they trade for that starting wing and they also get a better backup 5 in that same trade. Johnny, how will Hayes look after bulking up? It's a good question. I'm not exactly sure. I think that'll be something to monitor in the first preseason game. It's just like, is he as explosive and athletic, or is he a better rebounder now? Is he a better post defender? Like, how is it actually affecting his game? Because he is a guy who's such a freak athlete and has, just so explosive and quick that theoretically, if he bulks up and that affects that, it could be almost like the worst of both worlds, where he's still not strong enough to really be an impactful post defender or interior defender with his strength. But then he's also slower and like a worse finisher or not as explosive. And that's a pessimistic outlook on it. I think he should still probably look the same and maybe just be a little bulkier, a little better shape. Like he did have some room to bulk up a bit, right? So, but we haven't gotten to see them scrimmage, unfortunately. That has been something that has deteriorated throughout the course of my career in terms of them letting us watch scrimmages. They used to, like 10 years ago, they stopped because people would record it and people don't want to get like dunked on or embarrassed, crossed up, and one, like whatever. So they don't let us watch scrimmages anymore. Puppy Chow 302, shout out to Puppy Chow. What up? How good of a defender do you expect it to be? Can he guard 1 through 3? Yes, he can guard 1 through 3. I think right now he's probably more of like a 2 through 4 defender, but I think he has the potential to guard ones as well. I think he's expected to be a pretty good defender. I don't know. I don't want to put a ceiling on him because we just haven't seen him yet in an NBA context. We didn't see him in Summer League. So I feel like it would be premature to put an artificial ceiling on him. But Rob compared him to OG Anunoby on draft night, and that's very high praise. And he was a second round pick, and you would assume that if he was an OG Anunoby level defender, he probably would have been a first round pick. But he's had some health stuff, and the shot, the jumper is a work in progress, and that's a big thing for a wing that probably pushed him into the second round. But I think he could be I think his upside, again, and I want to be careful with how I frame it, but I think his upside is probably a starting level defender. Now, can the rest of his game grow into being a starting level player is a whole other conversation. And I think as things stand with the jumper and the offensive game, that probably projects more as a bench player. And then, so it just, I think, becomes more of a matter of his fit and his health and his long-term development. So I think, I guess tentatively, I would say he probably projects more as like a really good bench defender, but maybe he hits a higher ceiling and becomes a starting level player. I think there's still a lot to be determined. We haven't seen him yet in an NBA context. So I really want to see that first before I put some sort of ceiling or projection on him. David Parks, DeAndre Hunter trade. I think it's going to be hard to trade with Cleveland just because they're another contender. But yeah. Jeff Gu, tomorrow's starter prediction. My starting prediction for tomorrow is DeAndre Ayton, Rui Hachimura, Jake LaRavia, Austin, and Luka. Yeah, the two best players playing in the game for LA. That is my starting prediction. And of course, no LeBron, no Marcus, no Maxey, no Adu. So that's the five, I think. JB, almost like maybe. How is Vano's 3-point shooting so far from day 3 in camp? Shout out from the Philippines. Shout out to the Philippines. Thank you for the question. We didn't get to see Vando shoot threes today, unfortunately, but yesterday it looked good. Omaris, do you think they get any real minutes tomorrow with the starters? JJ implied they're going to play the first 3-ish quarters, but he's going to keep their stints, their rotation shifts shorter. So I think it'll probably be 4 to 6 minute shifts for most of the guys. He said he doesn't want them playing 8+ minutes. So I think they'll, I guess through 3 quarters, that's 36 minutes, probably in the high teens to low 20s would be my projection. Maybe even upwards into the mid 20s, but I don't think anyone's going to be playing, at least of the primary guys, top 6 or 7 guys, more than mid 20s. I'll close with this one. Matthew Wilson, do you think JJ will back off the switch heavy scheme some? I don't think it's necessary with 2 playable pick and roll bigs in a rotation now, assuming small ball will only be a 5 to 15 minute per game thing. I appreciate the tactical question here. In short, no, I don't. I think he might back off of it a little bit, but I think, I mean, I just asked him about the defense yesterday, and it sounds like he wants to pressure the ball more with Marcus and Vando, and feels like he's got better individual defenders than he had last season with a healthy Vando and a Marcus. But he said that basic principles and shifts and helping and low man and all that stuff is going to be the same. So I do think there's still going to be a switch heavy defense. Now, are they going to switch with DeAndre Ayton? I don't have clarity on that. I would assume they probably play more coverage with him, but you can't, I mean, they switched with Jackson at times last year. Maxey is a switchable defender. So I think even, maybe with the starting group or with Ayton specifically, they're more in coverage, at least when he's involved. But with everyone else, I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to just switch 1 through 4 essentially, and even 1 through 5, depending on the lineup. So that's a little concerning for me. I think the switching allows teams to target the defenders they want to target and the matchups they want to target, but it'll be something to track moving forward. But I'm going to wrap here. I went over, well over an hour, as always. 5 more minutes turns into 45. And that is why you should check out some of my recent advertising. But appreciate you guys so much. As a reminder, join the new Discord server. Will be linked in the description below. And also check out the channel memberships, which just launched. We got Late Night Gang, Baloncesto Sickos, and Buha's Brates. Appreciate you guys for your time, for rocking with me for almost 2 hours. Thank you so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow live from Palm Springs. I will be there for the preseason opener. We'll have some basketball to actually talk about and analyze and maybe even overreact to. A lot. We'll get to see the concepts. We'll get to see the rotation. We'll get to see what they're trying to do and have some real stuff to talk about finally. Quick one here from Johnny. Thank you for the super chat. Any word on Braun, Luka pick and roll? No word on that, but that is something I will be tracking. I mean, Braun has not participated in the scrimmaging or like live portions of training camp. He's just been an individual limited participant off to the side doing stuff with the coaching staff and like individual drills. So they haven't even had the time for that. But appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you all tomorrow.